The average family throws away around $1,500 of food every year, straight in the bin, and spends another $3,000 eating out on top of it. That's $4,500 gone before anyone's even trying to get rich. You didn't feel it leave? Nobody does. And yet someone near you earning exactly what you earn is quietly getting wealthy anyway. They're not smarter than you, they're not more disciplined, they've just stopped doing a handful of ordinary things you're still doing without noticing. They've stopped performing wealth. And the difference looks less like virtue and a lot more like laziness. Let's start with the thing almost nobody wants to admit they're doing. Most of the money that leaves your account was never actually spent on the thing you thought you were buying. It was spent on a message. The new car isn't transport, it's a signal. The upgraded phone isn't communication, it's a status update broadcast to people whose opinion of you changes absolutely nothing about your real life. Economists have a wonderfully bleak name for the trap underneath this: the hedonic treadmill. You buy the thing, you get the lift, and within a few short weeks that lift quietly evaporates and the shiny new baseline feels exactly as flat as the old one did. So you buy again, and you buy sooner this time because the gap between purchases keeps shrinking as the thrill wears off faster and faster. The boring rich figured out something that ordinary spenders keep missing their whole lives. They stopped entering the race at all. So let's begin with habit 1, and it's the heavyweight of the entire list. They drive an older car that's fully paid off, while you finance a brand new one and feel briefly wonderful about it. The average new car payment in America now runs around $770 a month. Do absolutely nothing clever with that money except refuse to spend it. Over 15 years, and you're looking at somewhere north of $170,000. That's not a car. That's a house deposit that quietly disintegrated, one automatic monthly installment at a time while you weren't watching. That leads straight into habit 2, the wardrobe. They wear the same small collection of decent clothes on rotation and let every trend sprint straight past them. No seasonal refresh. No keeping up. Ever notice how many genuinely wealthy founders seem to wear the same outfit in every single photo? That's not an accident, and it's not eccentricity. It's the same instinct pointed at cloth. And it rolls neatly into habit 3, the quiet killer that ties this whole section together. They live about 2 years behind their own income, the Raiselands. And instead of instantly upgrading their life to match it, they let that gap sit there, untouched, and grow. The car got nicer, the house got bigger, the holidays got longer, and somehow the account balance never moved. That's not bad luck. That's lifestyle creep, and it's the single most efficient wealth destroyer ever invented, precisely because it never feels like spending. It just feels like finally living the way you always deserved to. Here's what all of this looks like from the outside, and here's why the outside gets it wrong. It looks like restraint. It looks like heroic self-denial, but they're not white-knuckling their way past temptation every single day. They've simply opted out of a competition that nobody in the entire history of money has ever actually won. But willpower was never really the story here anyway. There's a comforting myth we tell ourselves about rich people, and it's that they were handed some superhuman reserve of self-control that you just weren't lucky enough to be born with. The research says something far more interesting. Your willpower isn't a fixed character trait at all. It's a fuel tank, and it drains as the day goes on. Every single decision you make, from what to wear to which email to answer first, quietly siphons a little more out of it. Psychologists call it decision fatigue. There's a now famous study out of Ben Gurion University published back in 2011 where researchers looked at over 1,000 parole board rulings. The finding was almost unbelievable. Prisoners who came up early in the morning when the judges were fresh got parole around 65% of the time. The ones unlucky enough to appear right before a break when the judges were depleted dropped to nearly zero. Same crimes, same paperwork. The only real variable was how tired the decision maker's brain happened to be. Now apply that exact machinery to yourself. By the time you're standing in your kitchen at 7 in the evening, drained and hollow, staring blankly into the fridge, the version of you making that food choice is running on fumes. That is not the heroic moment where discipline swoops in to save you. That's the exact moment discipline has already clocked out, packed up, and gone home for the night. So the boring rich do something that honestly looks almost pathologically dull from the outside. Which brings us to habit 4. They eat the same handful of meals on rotation. The same breakfast more or less every day. The same short list of dinners, not because they lack imagination or joy, but because every single meal they don't have to actively decide on is a little willpower they never have to spend. Then comes habit 5. They use what they already own before buying more of it. The half-empty bottle gets finished, the old jacket gets worn until it genuinely falls apart. The gadget gets kept until it dies, rather than replaced the moment something newer appears. And that flows right into habit 6. They bring their own food to the office, on the road, straight past the $12 airport sandwiches without so much as a flicker, because that decision was quietly made hours earlier at home when the tank was full. Notice what's actually happening underneath all three of those. They didn't get better at resisting, they deliberately built a daily life with almost nothing left in it to resist. Which brings us to the sneakiest, most underrated lever of the whole set: distance. There's an entire field of research built around one almost insultingly simple idea: friction. How physically hard is it in the moment to do the thing? Behavioral economists have shown over and over that tiny changes in effort produce enormous changes in behavior. Make something 2 clicks harder, and huge numbers of people simply stop doing it. Make it 1 tap easier, and they'll do it compulsively, without ever deciding to. And your spending runs on this exact mechanism. Every app app on your phone has spent millions of dollars and thousands of engineering hours grinding the distance between wanting something and owning it down to almost nothing. One thumb, a saved card. Purchase complete before the craving even had time to fade on its own. The boring rich quietly reverse the entire machine. They don't fight the current. They just build their little canal so it flows the other way. So let's talk about habit 7. They shop in person instead of online, which sounds completely backwards until you realize what it secretly does. It reintroduces friction. You have to get in the car, drive there, find parking, walk in, carry the thing out. And half the stuff you would have one-click bought at midnight simply never survives that whole journey. The craving needs the purchase to be instant, and the drive to the store is a slow, boring test almost no impulse ever passes. Think about the last thing you added to a cart online and forgot about within an hour. Now imagine having to physically go and fetch it. You already know you wouldn't have bothered. Which brings us to habit 8, and it's the exact mirror image of that, and it might just be the single most important item on the entire list. They pay themselves first. The money destined for savings moves automatically on payday before it ever lands in the spending account, before their brain even gets the chance to register it as money they're allowed to touch. No willpower required, no monthly decision to agonize over. Just a wall quietly built between them and their own worst impulses. And that pairs perfectly with habit 9, the small one everybody loves to mock. They make their coffee at home, not because a single flat white will ever bankrupt anybody, but because somewhere around $27 a day, spent quietly and automatically and forever, is very literally what a comfortable retirement turns out to be made of. The target was never their impulses at all. It was the distance between the impulse and the purchase. Now watch what actually happens when you run all of this for long enough. Here's the thing that separates boring wealth from every thrilling, exciting version of it you've ever been sold. Exciting money is spiky. The big win, the hot bet, the sudden windfall, it arrives fast and it leaves even faster. Boring money does the precise opposite. It compounds. It's nothing more than a gap between what you earn and what you spend, held open, patiently, stubbornly, for decades on end. Think back to that 2 years behind idea from earlier, because this is genuinely the whole game compressed into a single number. Your income climbs from $65,000 a year to $80,000, and instead of inflating your lifestyle to swallow every dollar of the difference, you just keep on living your $65,000 life. That $15,000 gap, invested and then left completely alone, quietly becomes the entire reason you retire years earlier than everyone around you. And that finally brings us to habit 10, the only one on this whole list that adds instead of subtracts, a hobby that just happens to make a little money. Not some grinding side hustle you secretly hate, something you genuinely do anyway that widens the very same gap from the opposite end. And the data sitting underneath all of this is almost anticlimactic. Study the real millionaire population, the actual people, not the ones on your feed, and you find something that quietly ruins the whole fantasy. Around 79% of them inherited absolutely nothing. They built it themselves from zero. And it took them, on average, close to 28 years to do it. Not a moment, not a bet, not a viral windfall. 28 long, unremarkable years of shoveling somewhere between $13,000 and $22,000 a year into the gap, and then letting compounding do the slow, unglamorous, almost boring rest, until one day it quietly crossed $1 million and simply kept on going. Rich was never a number they suddenly hit. It was a gap they refused to close, year after boring year. So go back to that $4.5 grand, the $1,500 rotting quietly in the fridge, the $3,000 handed over at restaurant counters. It was never really about the food, and nobody's asking you to feel guilty about a wilted bag of spinach or a nice dinner out, but it is a signal, a tiny readout, quietly telling you which of the two systems you're actually running. One system performs wealth, out loud, on a treadmill that wipes itself clean every few weeks and demands you climb back on. The other one just widens a gap and waits. The boring rich living near you didn't pay some heroic price that you were too weak to pay. They just stopped throwing things away. Money, mostly. They found the version of getting rich that asks for less, not more. Boring was never the cost of it. Boring was the whole mechanism.